Hello and welcome to Push Your Glasses Up. I'm Mikey. Today we're joined by Reena to talk about Dune Part 2. Finally we get to talk about it. But hey, real quick, before we get into the movie, if you enjoy these videos, the podcast, like them, subscribe to the channel. If you prefer to not watch it and you prefer to get it as an audio only podcast, you can do that at pretty much any podcast service that you prefer. I said prefer a lot there. Let's talk about Dune. Reena, hello.
Hey, Mikey.
It's that time again. It's that time for a Dune.
It's time to get spicy.
Sure. We did the first movie when it was 2021 when that came out, and we did an episode on that when you were still around full time. So it made sense for you to come back and do this one. I don't know if I was more excited for any other movie this year than this movie. So I had high expectations, but before I get into if it met mine, I want to know about how hyped you were going into it and if it matched that for you.
I mean, I was pretty hyped since this is kind of like the series, I'll go all the way back to the book series that kind of paved the way for so much other sci-fi that we love so much. So I'm always excited for anything related to Dune, but I got to see it in the big Jordan's IMAX.
Jealous.
So that made it like even better, which I learned recently is the largest IMAX screen in New England. The next largest one is the one that's in New York.
Yeah.
So and because
which is also not New England.
It was not in England, but I mean, like, that's
in the Northeast, yeah.
The next largest one. And then some of it was shot in IMAX too, so it was incredible to see.
The whole thing is shot in IMAX. This one, the whole thing is. The first one is partly, but this one is entirely.
So it was fun to see it like in its like true format. But yeah, no, I was pretty hyped to see, and I was interested, like, you know, when you're doing a book adaptation, I was pretty sure, like, you know, where this one was gonna end. So it was cool to like see, or I didn't know if they were gonna add maybe some like
have some deviations
Easter eggs or like or like leading up to maybe like the future movies or like what's going on there in the future books. But yeah, no, I was pretty hyped. I mean, as soon as those popcorn buckets came out, I was like ready to go.
And I had to report on them for work.
Fun times. I got my discount Benny Jesuit cosplay ready. And yeah, I really enjoyed it. I feel like the discourse around it is a lot more interesting than the first time around, as people kind of contemplate whether or not Paul Atreides is a hero or a white savior. And it's been like interesting to see like how since the first movie, like, conversations around this movie have changed. But compared to like the first one, which was great, like, I mean, the movie version, I mean, like, for its time, this is an amazing epic, and I was pretty stoked to see it.
Yeah, let me touch on the that discourse aspect.
Here's a bunch of things.
Yeah, let me touch on that discourse part first. It's funny that it's happening because yes, he is, but also, like, I think the more interesting thing about the discourse is the fact that there are people who are like, well, no, it's not supposed to be a question whether or not he's the chosen one or whatever. And it's like, nah, dude, like, there's always that question's always been there. Like, it is supposed to be a matter of, yes, there is a prophecy, but also it is a lie. But also it is coming true, but also there are machinations. Like, it is a very complicated, like you said, epic, where it's like all of these levels are like true and false at the same time. And
I think they do a really good job, though, in the film of kind of bridging that gap for people who haven't read the books.
Oh, 100%.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, they're a little more explicit in how they kind of show that. Like, he states that it's a lie. Like, they're very clear about like the Benny Jesuit put all like created the prophecy, and then even when they like tell him this, like he knows what he's supposed to, he like resists it.
Well, that's
like,
that's
he's not like chosen one.
Yeah, and that's something that I wanted to get into in a little bit too, but like it is an interesting thing for this discourse to happen in general, just because it is like, this, like, yeah, he's a white guy going to a place where it's like he's not of the people, and he's becoming of the people. Like, we've seen it many times, and we know that story goes back through history with the fact that we, like, whenever we talk about like the Avatar thing and people are like, oh, it's Dances with Wolves, it's like, okay, but it's also, and I've said this before on this podcast when we talked about Avatar, like, that is also the Once and Future King. It is a King Arthur story. So it's like we've seen it many times before, where it's just like, yes, that is absolutely part of the theme in this, is like, this white boy saves stuff.
but he doesn't.
Right. Yeah. I think
right. Like, that's the thing.
Yeah. And that's the thing. I think they do that. Denny does a good job of balancing a story of like, yes, there is a chosen one aspect of this movie, but there is also a resistance to it, because really Paul's story is him wanting to get revenge. And then Jessica's machinations come into it, and it's really her drive to make him the chosen one. And once she is exposed to like the ancestors, basically memories and everything, that's when she actually is in and starts really pushing this. Because originally, like with the last movie, when they're talking in the tent and all that stuff, she is just like being a supportive mom for the most part in that moment, and is saying like, we will go along with your plan to basically usurp the throne, and we'll do whatever we can to get there. And it's not until she's actually like, she goes through her own transformation that like she's sort of converted herself. And so it is really interesting that these conversations are coming up to me, because it's just like, it's on the screen, y'all. Like, it's on the screen. It's in the books. And like, the people will say like, it's not what Dune is supposed to be. And it's like, maybe you just didn't read it that way.
Well, I mean, the whole thing is that he knows that if he ascends or if like he ascends this path, right? If he becomes this person, that there's going to be like bloodshed and death. And like, that's not a spoiler. Like he foresees it, and he's not like entirely sure until about the end of the movie which visions are like true and which ones are just a probability. Like, he's seeing a lot of probabilities, right? In different
possible
paths.
Futures.
Kind of like Doctor Strange. Yeah. When he's like, oh, I've seen so many futures, this is the only way we win, like in Endgame. Or no, in Infinity War. But so we kind of like see how his mind is working. But like at the end of the day, like the path that he needs to take is going to lead to bloodshed. And it's this idea that like power ultimately corrupts, and he's like, oh, I don't want to do that. Like, I am of the people, I'm just one of you, like I'm totally chill. And like, half of them are going, not really, and half of them like, no, you're the Messiah, this is great, like 100%. No, you don't have to be so humble, we totally believe in you.
Well,
and then Chani's like, okay, bro, we'll see what happens.
And that's what's cool, is I think it does a really good job of exploring both sides of that, and explaining that like, yes, there are good intentions for certain paths to be followed, but also that going the route of messianic kind of deity at like statehood or whatever.
Holy war. It's no one wins the holy war.
And it's like they do a good job of explaining that this is a decision that can be made, but maybe not necessarily the right decision, even though like it will result in what you want to do. Like, I think it's such a crazy thing, because like we talk about, it's everything is simplified on a screen in a way to like help explain it to the audience. but also it's still an immensely complicated source material that is still immensely complicated on screen when you actually like start picking apart all those aspects. And I think on that level of that main theme, I think it's very, very good at handling that complicated nature. But then it also, like, on the scale of just from the first movie to the second movie, I think this does I was trying to find like the right way to explain this, and the only thing I can keep coming back to is like it's Alien to Aliens, but it's not really. It's just my best sort of example where it's like Alien is this a little more quiet, like there's action, but like it's a little more quiet. It's a little more specific about its story, as opposed to like you get to Aliens and it opens up a lot more of the like world building and stuff, which is kind of ironic because I'm about to like flip flop on that. But like with the first Dune, it is a little bit more of just like world building without being like able to let loose fully, which I adored.
It's like season 1 of Game of Thrones. Like, here are the houses, here's the history, here's why this is important.
It's the setup of machinations.
Is about.
Yeah. And so
this is why people care about Arrakis. Like,
and
this is why this is a problem.
It's sort of allowed to let loose with part 2, which is like the reason I kept coming back to the Aliens thing is because it's like this kind of became an action movie like versus the first movie that was like a steeping kind of movie where it was like we're setting everything up. This one is allowed to just be like, okay, this is happening, instead of like living in it. And I think it's really cool. It's like
Worm versus Worms, or like Shai Hulud versus Shai Huluds.
Sure, yeah. With a money no, it's still Shai Hulud. He just made it a money sign on the first S.
But I mean, there were more creatures in this one, so that stands up with your comparison. The first Alien had like pretty much just the one, and this one had several. So
but yeah, I
and baby ones.
Yeah, very young ones. With pee that gets drank. But yeah, I think it's really cool that they were able to do that, but also at the same time, like, make specific relationships feel organic and real. So like Shawnee and Shishakli, I think, like just the two girls having like a really interesting friendship, the way that they kind of bounce off one another. It feels like a real friendship. It doesn't feel just like, okay, this is a sci-fi movie, we need to make people talk to each other and stuff. So I think they did a good job of like the scale of epic and plot and character in this. And I think I prefer the first movie, but I think this is a better movie in terms of like how rounded out everything is, like how much it feels like it hits all the beats of a blockbuster movie, where the first one feels like a really big budget art movie kind of. But yeah,
they do such a good job with the cinematography in these two, because there's a lot of like minimalism, because I mean, you're in the desert, right? So like how much can you really do when like that's the whole point, is like it's a desert and like there's nothing there. And then the contrast when we see the Harkonnens and like everything's very monochrome and like very severe.
Oh my god,
and,
the
like,
design on like that world is so good.
We've been on Arrakis this whole time. Let's talk about the Harkonnens for a minute.
Yeah, when you go to like experience their world, like and being in that like black sun that causes everything to be monochrome outside, like you go interior on the buildings and everyone has color, but you go to where the sun is shining and it becomes like an ink blot, to the point where like they're shooting off fireworks, and it's
fireworks, like the ink blot,
it's
the
so
inky fireworks.
good. It's such a good design choice. I adore it. And yeah, I think they do a really cool like you got those notes of like, yes, they are like a black and white style design to counter everything else going on with the movie in the first one, but like in this one they really hammer it home. Like they go really hard into it.
Because I feel like in the first film we saw them, but like we also mostly saw them, you know, on Arrakis dealing with the Atreides, like in ships, like that kind of deal. And like there were obviously some like in the throne room, but we didn't really spend a lot of time with them. They were just kind of like the main, like the setup main.
It wasn't
villain,
as much
like,
of a civilization. It was just like bad guys.
Yeah. But now like we kind of like get it. And then do we do spoilers? Are we going to do spoilers?
Yeah. I mean, some of the stuff
like,
we've already talked about, I would say is spoilery. So whatever. But
like one of the big reveals, especially for non-book readers, is that Jessica is a Harkonnen. Thus, Paul is Atreides and Harkonnen. So, but I feel like only like increases his whole like, oh yeah, I am the chosen one. That like helps convince him even further. He's like, I'm gonna do all this. Like, I have both houses. Like, I don't know. He just is like, I can be as severe as I want. Like, this is in my blood. It almost like empowers him.
Yeah,
where I feel like
it allows like, it allows him to. He straight up says like, we're gonna do this by being Harkonnens now, and it's like, it's such a good. The way that they like have him go through and being resistant to the whole chosen one holy thing, like it's basically in that same moment where he opens up to say like, we're going to do it that way, the way that you know, that bloodline within us would do. And that's the moment that it allows him to actually like open up to the idea of actually being that person. And that's where the danger, like the signs of danger of going down that path really start to come in. Like it's being explained by other people, but like we don't actually physically see it in the movie until Paul actually accepts it.
I mean, shout out to Timothée Chalamet, but like as soon as he drinks like the worm juice and all the truth is revealed to him, his whole face changes. Yeah. His whole demeanor changes. He is a fundamentally different person after all of that is revealed to him and he like knows the secret.
There's humanity that's lost in that moment.
Like now he sees that path. The path is clear and he's no longer like, that path has a lot of death in it. I don't really want to do that. Now he's kind of on like, this is my destiny. Like I'm going to do this. And like the way he like, you see a glimmer when he looks at Chani for like a second, that like he like old Paul is there, but then like that pieces out like pretty quickly, especially when he's like,
it's the moment when he's like, no, I have to be cold. Yeah.
When he's like, yo, I'm gonna marry your daughter. That's cool.
Yeah.
And she's like, what the?
And
she's like, I'm out. Sorry, Christopher Walken. I'm gonna marry your daughter.
It's the deal that was made to keep him alive.
Yeah, and then she's also a Bene Gesserit, so she already knew.
Yeah, but yeah, I really that's the exploration of Chani with like her experience with the whole prophecy thing and like the way that she's introduced is that like she's part of a prophecy but doesn't want to be a part of a prophecy and like doesn't believe in it and anything like the confrontation of like seeing what it means for her when some of that starts coming true and whether or not it's like organically happening or somebody else is setting it up, which is just like that's the whole debate going on, right? Is like, well, is he supposed to, or is it the Bene Gesserit's like setting it all up or whatever, which is like very clearly like millennia of setting that up.
Right. It's like, how much is your free will and how much of this has just been put in motion for you? Like you're just a player on a board at this point.
Exactly, because they go through the whole process of explaining like there are multiple options. There isn't just Paul. Like they're setting up multiple people.
There's Elvis.
Yeah. Austin Butler, great in this movie. I do think his accent slipped a little bit when he was doing the like, Stellan Skarsgård voice. It was like He was there sometimes really well, and then sometimes it was like half there.
Was Bill not available? Because actually Matthew thought that was Bill Skarsgård. He's like, wow, they really did seem like father and son, and I was like, that wasn't him.
Tall, healthy blonde. So
you know.
Yeah, I like, man, this cast is fucking nuts.
Oh wait, one thing about when you're talking about like Chani, it was very clear that she loved Paul, but like she always carried it with, she knew he was gonna leave, and like no matter how much he said, no, I'm not gonna change, I'm always gonna be who I am, she like, you could see it, like she wanted to believe him, but like I don't think she ever did. And when she leaves, the look on her face is like, I fucking knew it. I knew it.
And I think a big part of that is her dealing with the fact that it's like she recognized that he was going to fall victim to the praise of everybody. And so it's just a really, like, that's a kind of fascinating.
And that power corrupts. Like the further he went down this path, the more she was gonna, like, the greater the chance that she lost him.
And it's
like,
just it's a fascinating, because we've seen like that kind of thing before. It's like seeing the one you love go down the wrong path or whatever, but like the way that it's handled here is I think more interesting than a lot of the times we see that story.
Because there's no way he's not going to avoid it. And I feel like she realized that sooner than he did.
Yeah, because I think she realized that he was going to either start to believe in it himself and I keep using the word fall prey to, but like fall prey to everybody's ass kissing, basically. And it was either that, or she was just like, or he's still gonna do that even if he doesn't believe it. He's using that. Like she recognized that was because it was both. Like in the beginning, he was leaning into it a little bit because he knew he could use that to get revenge. But then it started to become, I mean, it's Anakin, right? Like it's
yeah. And he was naive to think that like somehow, like it's where like the arrogance has like a double edge, right? Because the arrogance is like, oh, I don't have to do this. Yeah. Like I can do what I want. I'm my own man. I'm strong enough to like beat this.
Do you know who my dad is?
Right? I mean, I wish he was in this movie, but that's fine.
Well,
R.I.P.
He did.
Leto Atreides.
But yeah, I really like that the way that they handled Paul's plans of revenge and then him starting to fall into what everybody was believing in him, and then Jessica's machinations that initially started as support for Paul to then her opening up to belief in the prophecy more. And like it's just, I think it's a really well done, like these are these things that like, you know, Game of Thrones spread out over seasons and seasons, right? Like these kind of crazy multi-strand stories that it takes a lot to cover. And I think they did a really good job of condensing it in this movie so that like you can still experience it fully, but you're not there for, you know, a 12 to 20 episode season. You actually still get it. It's just in 3 hours, which does not feel like 3 hours. Like it feels shorter than that.
They did a good job. Like we know the other houses are coming at the end of the movie, but like we haven't really been introduced to them. Like having like the Emperor and then the Harkonnens and then the Atreides and the Fremen. Like those are like our 4 main groups, and kind of sticking to that.
Well, it's just like everything else. They don't do exposition for exposition's sake. They let the world just exist. Like they literally never say like the reason spice is important is because there are no more like AI computers, and so the way that you can navigate through space is by being exposed to spice. It's like they don't go into all that because that's such a, that can be, so that's great for like if they did a Peter Jackson expanded version of this or whatever. Denny said he's never going to do that, but like if they wanted to, that would be the perfect stuff to go into, right? But when you're watching a movie in the theater, like the mass audience is not gonna be cool with that. That's
Right, and, like,
too
spice is
heavily detailed.
and plus spice can be it's a stand-in for oil. It can be a stand-in for
Yeah,
any,
yeah,
like, important natural resource.
yeah.
Like, we get that's, like, a story as old as time. Like, we get that. That, group A has a thing that's really important, and then groups B, C, D, and E want that thing, and everyone tries to control it. Like, that's pretty standard,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
I do love also the levity that's in this movie, which we got a little bit in the first movie. Particularly, I think like Jason Momoa as Duncan Idaho was great for that. As small of an aspect of the last movie as that was, but like Stilgar in this movie is so like Javier Bardem is so funny in this movie, man. Like
everyone needs a friend like Stilgar just to hype you up the whole time. Like,
just like he shit his pants as it was written. Like it's like so good.
Oh, he's so humble.
Yeah, the cutaway to him speaking to what are basically like apostles at this point, where he's just like it is just a hard cut to him talking to them, and he literally says like he is too humble to actually admit this, but like it's so good. It's such a like going into this movie, I didn't I expected to like chuckle or whatever. The whole theater was laughing. And on top of that, it was a 10:30 p.m. screening. So like getting out of there at like 1:30 in the morning, that is a tired audience, but everyone was still like laughing in those moments. It was so well done. It's crazy like how much and that's what I'm saying like earlier. This is a more well-rounded movie. This has more moments like that. This like the first movie doesn't really have as much of that. It doesn't have much romance to it. This does. It doesn't have much like of the sort of cliche things you expect from a huge movie, right? Like this kind of has it all, which is nuts that it's Dune.
Well, like you also have like top tier cast, right? So
of course,
like Timothée Chalamet is amazing. I feel like you have a lot of like superheroes in this, or like people who are leads in other, like they can lead their own movies.
Oh yeah,
right. So it's like top tier cast.
It's an ensemble of A-listers, basically. Yeah, it's an Ocean's 11 movie. Except
right.
I was gonna say except in the desert, but that was last
like
that was Vegas.
Sand Dunes 11.
Yeah.
I did like how in this movie, to your point about it's having like a little more heart and a little more levity, like we really got to understand how the Fremen live and like how they survive in the desert. Like we really kind of like step into their world more in this movie, where in the last one we were kind of on like the outsider's view. We're on like Paul's view of looking into this, of like what it's like to come to Arrakis, right, from somewhere else. And now it's like, what is it like to live there? And
not just a deeper look in general, but like a very specific look at like the different factions of people, of like depending on what part of the world they are from. It's like from the south they're more fanatical and way more religious, and from up north they're more just like, no, we believe in the people, and the people are the ones that will set us free. Like that's pretty interesting to be able to like go into that detail, but then also like allow it to be explored in a way where it's like this group of people has the different factions within it, and it's super well done on that like world building level without losing touch with the like but we still need the characters to like be endeared to the audience and stuff.
I love the moment when Paul tries to like explain what the better way to sandwalk is, because he's seen it.
He sandsplains.
Like, right? She's like, bro, are you for real right now? This is real
he
life.
Does. I like that they have him stop himself though. He's like, you're right.
Yep. She's like, she just stops and is like, for real? But to your point about like levity,
Yeah.
that was like another. They're like these little moments in what is like pretty much a war movie.
Yeah. I mean,
for like a lot of it.
Yeah. Like that
It's
whole montage of them like growing to care about one another is set on a backdrop of war. And yeah, like I understand a lot of people have the complaint of like, well, this was supposed to be years and years, but it was condensed to the point where like the baby is not even born yet.
I think that's fine though.
The way that they were telling this story, I think it works great.
I think it was actually creepier. Like I've seen like his sister, like the old Dune, right? And like that was creepy children. Oh my gosh. I think having like basically Jessica have like this dual persona because like the child is speaking to her and then they both speak or speaks through her even is way creepier than having like an actual.
So did you notice
child.
the cool thing that they did with that though is we as the audience the entire time she is saying my daughter says this, my daughter says this until Paul drinks and he hears her, then we hear Anya Taylor-Joy. That was a really well done like reveal of like why we're not hearing the character yet. It's just such a cool
because we're with Paul, like he is our POV.
Yeah, he's not connected to that voice yet, and once he is, then we hear it. It's so like it's so simple, but like the simplicity is where the brilliance is, and that kind of delivery. It's so good.
And she's very important. Like if you have we can't have too many like important people, and this was really like the outcome of this movie is him accepting that like he has to go down this path, like and starting to believe that like he is meant to do this.
Yeah. And there is like there's understandable qualms I think that people who adore the books have, where like I was saying with that time span being condensed, you lose out on the fact that like Paul and Johnny should have kids right now, technically. So you do lose some of that. But for the story they're telling, I think that it's probably the right call because we're, as far as Denny has said, he is not going to do anything past Messiah. And that stuff that really comes to fruition with God Emperor. And so we're not, unfortunately, to my dismay, likely not going to see a person turn into a worm.
This whole series is answering the question, would you still love me if I was a worm?
Yeah. But I do think that they sort of like.
By the way, Matthew said no to that because he thinks worms are gross. So I'm on my own if that ever happens.
Well, we'll just try to make sure it doesn't happen. It's going to be hard.
Would you be my best friend if I was a worm?
Yeah, I don't care.
See, this is why we've been friends for 20 years.
Yeah. But yeah, I think there are teases kind of towards it though, where it's like where he has his visions where it keeps cutting to like, and I follow somebody to the south and it brings destruction and stuff. But you see like the person down on all fours and like their jaw is extending and stuff. And I'm like, is that them kind of teasing it? Is that them like not going for it fully, but like kind of saying it could happen? Because that is all I could think about when I saw that image.
Yep.
Yeah, it's I'm curious how, because like this is the least weird part of it, right? So like I'm curious how weird they can get, because like I already say that they're not going to do God Emperor, but like God Emperor is where you get like, yes, it is out of like it's a paperwork thing, but like their two kids marry each other and like it gets weird.
Okay, well, we like seen that in Game of Thrones though. Like I think and like
yeah, Game of Thrones isn't a PG-13 series.
yeah, I mean that's true.
Yeah.
But I mean, I guess if you don't, you can say it but don't show. I guess it depends on how much you show.
Right. And I mean, like that's what I'm saying. Like it is very explained that it is a paperwork kind of thing where they just need to like to allow the Worm King basically to like actually be emperor, they have to do that. But yeah, I want to know how far Denis Villeneuve is willing to go, like into the weird in the next one.
Or are we just gonna go, because by the time we get to God Emperor, like, are we just gonna see, like, is this just gonna be Paul's story? And like that's kind of the end of it.
That's basically where I think he wants to do is just Paul's story. So that's why he's like, after Messiah, I would be done. Because then it is the kid's story.
And I mean, I know some like spoilers, and then there's some other characters that come back, and then it becomes their story, sort of. Or they
are you talking about Duncan?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we're talking about spoilers, so I'm not worried about spoiling the book or anything. I don't care about that. That's fine.
Okay.
I would be shocked if Duncan Idaho does not return in the next movie.
And return.
Yeah. But like it's more of a God Emperor thing, but like I would be shocked if he didn't come back for like the third one, because it is like it would give a good, just like with like Gurney coming back in this one, it would give
I didn't even mention that.
Yeah, it would give a really good full circle, even though it's like not him, but it is like it would allow Paul to have that emotional contact that sort of like could give him a little bit of the humility back, right? A little bit of the family aspect back. So I would be shocked if it doesn't. And it's also like you're gonna not bring Jason Momoa back. Like, I
mean, it's not like he has a lot of Aquaman commitments these days.
He does not.
Now
on HBO Max or just Max.
You mentioned Gurney. We didn't even like talk about like his reunion with Paul, but like seeing him
so good, and also like brings us back to like when we first met Paul, and like the reminder of like this is how he grew up. These were his people. We spent most 2/3 of the movie at that point where Paul is a Fremen, or like trying to be a Fremen, and like all of a sudden we remember, oh no, he like grew up, he's like an aristocrat. His dad is the Duke. This is the man that trained him. He had all the training and all the books and all the things. More specifically on that front. The callback that we get, like the first movie does this callback where early on, in the whole scene where they're explaining like the shields and stuff, and like the really well done kind of exposition of the first movie where they're not saying stuff, they're just letting a scene happen to be like, this is how the shields work. In that scene, Paul says, I know your footsteps, old man. And like, then when he is first exposed to the spice and has a bit of a a connection, a
bad trip.
Yeah. He's staring at like the treads on that crawler and says like, I know your footsteps, old man. And then it like he gets grabbed and pulled back to the ship. And then the way to like pull that back in this when they finally see each other again is just like so perfectly, like that is the quintessential thing of writing, right? Like you go back to moments that mean something. And so like to have that after being separated for like, close to a year roughly at this point, I would say, less than that. It probably like 6 months because the baby. But yeah, like it's just so handily done. Like it's like tying something up with a bow, and it's just.
You brought up another good point though, and it was actually about the fight between. Why can't I remember Austin Butler's character's name?
Fade Routha.
Fade Routha and Paul, and it goes back to like his birthday, and he's like fighting these like
his 111th birthday.
he's fighting these like drugged up Atreides like leftovers, right? And then at the same time he's doing this, he has the shields up, and he only fights the last guy like in real combat, and then he thinks he's gonna take on Paul, who's been like training for this like his whole life, who's never like who has been fighting with the Fremen this whole time, no shields, just like straight up fighting, and like somehow thinks he's gonna win. And I was like, oh no, this is not gonna happen. There's no way.
Well, I do love the way that they explain that gladiator scene, which is like they show that family has no mercy, and it's like
it's enabled. Like it's not even like it's not like real.
No,
right?
yeah,
it's
yeah.
like a spoiled brat kind of.
It's
thing.
a spoiled brat thing, but also like the adult in the situation is also like, I don't fucking care about you. Like, it's such a great. I mean, it's like it's Jabba the Hutt, but like it's such a great way to show that Baron Harkonnen doesn't actually like. It's such that like why can't I think of the word that I'm going for, but like that classically Knights of the Round kind of like the bad guys use their family members instead of like gaining the love of them, and it's just so well done that I'm so mad at myself that I can't think of words right now. Long day. But it's such a well done moment to show that like the nephews are a means to an end for the Baron. And meanwhile, the nephews are trying to prove themselves. Like we didn't talk about Dave Bautista either, where it's just
which they're proving themselves, and like they have different approaches, right? And I feel like the younger like one was coddled a lot more than Dave Bautista, like as the like seems like the older uncle, and like
or the older nephew.
Or nephew. He clearly has a favorite. Like there's a favorite.
Yeah, oh yeah, yeah.
And it's not Dave Bautista.
Yeah, and it's that's the one thing I do think. Like I love Bautista. I think he is so talented that I don't love that he's not given much to do outside of just be like a rage monster, which is just like, yeah, the character is that, but like I think there is more.
I think he played it with like a lot of frustration though, which I thought was great. He wasn't just like everything was going wrong for him.
They just I don't think they gave him enough of a chance to like just show his face reacting. You don't have to have him screaming the whole time. Yeah, and that's sort of like the bummer, because he has the range to be able to do that. So like
he's not the Rock.
Well, yeah, Dave Bautista is like, this discussion comes up and it's like the three wrestlers turned actors like in order are Dave Bautista, John Cena, The Rock. Where it's like you get diminishing returns on like the range that they have, but like Cena has the same charisma as The Rock, but can also like play characters, whereas The Rock just plays The Rock. And then Dave Bautista is a very charismatic person, but he doesn't have like that level of riz, but he has so
a better dramatic range.
He has so much more range and talent in actually acting. And it's like, and you know, that goes as far as saying like Denis Villeneuve did Blade Runner 2049, and you saw that range in him in a very small amount of time. So that's why it's a bit of a bummer to like only see him screaming when I know he could convey the same things by just like holding on his face for a second.
Yeah, but they were like trying to really hone in on Austin Butler in this one as like another potential candidate for the Messiah position.
Yeah, and they did the simplified thing of being like ragey muscle guy versus conniving, confident, like finesse guy. So like I get that they were doing it. I just think it would have been cool to see a little bit more from Dave as well.
Oh, when Paul finally like avenges his father and takes out the Baron, and then they just dump him like a bag of trash in the desert.
Yeah,
is amazing. It reminded me of like Danny DeVito's Penguin when he like floats away in Batman Returns.
Similar shape.
Similar shape,
Yeah.
but just
Yeah,
with ants instead of penguins this time though. Lots and lots of ants.
It's so crazy that like you keep thinking about like all these characters and stuff, and it's just like this cast, like I keep coming back to it, but like this cast is unbelievable.
Unbelievable. And then I'm also like, I'm thinking about that, but like then there's the scale, right?
Yeah.
Like the worms are incredible.
Oh, that
like,
scene where Paul rides it for the first time, like my God.
And they made it difficult. Like it wasn't easy because you would be getting blasted with sand like the whole time. Like it's not like an easy thing, and like you're kind of understanding their like anatomy.
There was
a
so
little
much
bit better.
But again, this is like, it was like such a classic action movie moment where it's like there was a joke where like he's calling the worm and they're saying like don't embarrass us, don't shame us, make sure it's a big one, blah blah blah, and then it's the biggest
one.
biggest fucking worm ever, and it cuts back to Javier Bardem and he just goes, oh, not that big. I was like, how did you manage to like find the balance of the seriousness from the first movie and then just inject it with like just the right amount of like crowd pleaser stuff? It's bonkers that they're able to figure that out to me.
Balance. This whole movie is an amazing case study on balance in a film. Balancing out the cast, balancing out like the story between people who have read the books and are really familiar with the source material and people who are new to it. Like expert levels of figuring out,
and the pacing,
where to go.
Both of these movies feel like they are about 2 hours and 15 minutes long. And the first one is 2 hours and 35, and this one is 2 hours and 45.
Because there's like, they give you room to breathe in between all the action, between all the stuff. They like know when to like give you a minute,
and it's
instead of
but
just
it's
trying
not
to like cram it all in.
And it's the gaps aren't so big that you then start to get tired in those moments. Like it's,
you're not like, okay, like what's
even
next?
Even Infinity War and Endgame, I would say, had those moments where it was just like, all right, like the scene where Captain America is reintroduced after being on the run and stuff, and it's just like, yeah, it's a good scene, but like where it's placed in the movie, it could have been like 2 minutes shorter, kind of thing. And like I wouldn't cut a moment from these movies. I
didn't even realize it was that long until I looked at what time we got out of the theater.
What time? Like, what time showing did you have?
Oh, like 7:30.
Oh, okay. So you were getting out at like 11.
Yeah, I was getting out like a normal time, but because it went so quickly, I was like, wow, that was like a really short movie.
Yeah.
Like, it's not a short movie. And like, because it was the big IMAX, there was only like 2 trailers.
Oh yeah, because that they only have one screen at that theater. So it's helpful because they can only advertise for a month ahead. That's the whole reason I went to the place I used to work, because I was initially going to go to an AMC at like a reasonable hour. But then certain stuff with the job like got in the way of that, so I had to cancel that. And then I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna go to my old job where I know it will only be 3 trailers. So I knew I wasn't getting out of there 4 hours later. So yeah.
Although I would have no, because I saw it on the 29th. I would like to see Nicole Kidman's new AMC spots, because I come to that place for magic. But those are in the AMC, so I'll have to wait till the next movie.
Kung Fu Panda's this weekend.
Kung Fu Panda 4. Yeah. And I have seen the first 3.
I don't
know if that's really a point of pride.
I've only seen the first 2. I would assume the third one is just as good, but like the first 2 are excellent. It's that thing.
I mean, it's Jack Black.
Well, it's also that thing of like, it's DreamWorks, and DreamWorks kind of gets shit on, but like DreamWorks also did How to Train Your Dragon. They're really good. And like for the time, the Shrek movies were pretty good. Like it's
What do you mean for the time? The Shrek movies are still good.
Not all of them.
We do not.
Two of them
we
are.
do not talk shit about Shrek on this podcast. Not in my watch.
You don't have a watch on this podcast anymore. You're a guest.
Still a co-founder.
Two of them great. Two of them are great. Two of them I think are just not that great. But yeah, we've sidetracked far too much. So I think we can probably call it on the episode for now. Yeah, I'm ultimately very pleased. I do think, like, for Denis Villeneuve movies, I do still prefer Blade Runner 2049. I think is like a pitch perfect movie. I think this is almost that, and then the first Dune is also almost that. So it's he's reached that level of like Nolan at this point where it's just like,
ooh, that's high praise.
Well, it's, I mean, granted, I didn't like Tenet, but like, it's that thing where it's like, yeah, I'm going to see his movies. Like, I don't care what the movie is. I could know nothing about it. I will see his movies. And that, I feel like that's the level that Nolan is at, where it's just like, I trust him to make a movie that will at least have interesting parts, if not blow me away. So, yeah. Cool. All right. Well, we'll figure out when the next time you come on is. Maybe we'll do all 4 Shrek movies.
Ooh, don't get me excited.
Yeah. Or we'll do the Minion movies.
Even better.
Yeah. Because there is Despicable Me 4 coming out as well. Kung Fu Panda.
But realistically, it's probably going to be X-Men.
It will be X-Men 97 for sure.
Yes.
But that'll be a while from now, so we'll see.
I might do an actual cosplay for that one. I can't let Cash be the only one.
Yeah, that's true. He is. Maybe I'll try to get both of you guys on, because he is currently building a Magneto suit.
Oh, well, there we go.
Yeah.
And you know, my Jubilee is top tier. So
it's true. All right, cool. Well, until next time. Bye.